Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Cheatham, and I'm a member of the advisory board of the TomTom Foundation. On behalf of our board and team, I want to thank each of you for being here. This morning panel kicks off the final week of the Cities Rising Summit. We will hear from leading organizers from Virginia, Texas, and Alabama about their efforts to mobilize youth voter turnout during a pandemic. Something I think we can all agree on is both a challenge and an opportunity. The Cities Rising Summit has been made possible by the support of sponsors, by our sponsors. Today's session in particular is supported by Apex Clean Energy, as well as community members like you. This is your last chance to donate directly to this initiative, so we encourage you to consider doing so today at tomtomfoundation.org/give. We are going to start this morning's event with an introduction from Tiffany Norwood. Tiffany is the founder and CEO of TribeTan, as well as a global serial entrepreneur and one of the first successful Black female tech entrepreneurs in the world. In her late 20s, Tiffany raised $670 million to fund the first ever global digital satellite radio startup, WorldSpace. She is here today to talk about how to vote like a boss. Tiffany, how are you doing?
Good morning. I'm great. Thank you for that awesome introduction.
Oh no, it is awesome for you to be here. We're so excited. We're so excited about this particular panel and voting like a boss and doing everything we need to in just 7 days away, right?
Yeah, 7 days. So, I've been bossing up. I'm not an activist per se, as you mentioned, I'm an entrepreneur and a tech entrepreneur. And so I'm really honored to be a part of this panel, but like a good boss, we show up and be heard and counted, right? So
exactly. So we are all here to learn and take it all in. So thank you so much. And I'm going to get out of here. Thank you, Tiffany. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So this panel has been focusing on the youth vote. So I thought I would start by telling you a bit about my youth. I've always been a long-time entrepreneur, and at 19, I founded my first company and filed for my first patent. By 23, I had the patent, and as was mentioned, in the 90s, at the age of 27, I did something that no other entrepreneur has done since or had done, which was I raised $670 million for a startup. So to me, talking about youth leaders or youth vote or youth bosses, right, is redundant because bosses come in all ages, genders, races, shapes, and sizes. My mindset was always the boss's mindset. I did not need someone with a title to tell me what to do or to speak up or stand up for myself, although doing so was awkward and in some cases challenging and dangerous because I was also the first of my family to be born with all of my civil rights. When I was born, Martin Luther King was still alive. It was in '68, and Martin Luther King was fighting for racial justice, Gloria Steinem, women's rights. The gay rights movement was starting, Nelson Mandela, apartheid, and the US was in Vietnam. So that mindset of, I'm a boss, my voice matters, my ideas matter, my opinion matters, my vote matters, was important and related very strongly to being an entrepreneur and breaking so many barriers and I started coding in the 70s, so starting in the 80s and 90s and the thousands. And so I want to, in introducing this panel, make the case for voting as a leadership skill and ask you, as I've asked myself, like, could I have started these companies and raised all that money and filed for patents if every 2 to 4 years, my country, my state, my city was telling me my vote didn't matter and therefore I didn't have the right to vote? Or if I took on that mindset with the right to vote and chose to stand aside and stand off the field of play, to bench myself, right? Bosses never waste the opportunity to be heard or counted. So I would like to make the case, setting aside policy and politicians and political parties, to make the case for voting as a leadership skill and as an act of self-worth, and to step into the field of play, to get off the bench and to play, because we all know that games are not won by the coach and the assistant coach. It's us, the players, that win the game. And I'll also say that if you don't think your vote matters, there's a high likelihood that you're not thinking your ideas, opinions, and dreams matter, because raising your hand and speaking up and standing up is an act of self-actualization, self-determination, and it plays out throughout all of your life. So with that, I wrote Vote Like a Boss, and I'm asking everyone to take the Vote Like a Boss challenge, where each person, it doesn't matter what age you are, gets one other person to vote or checks in on one other voter. You can go to votelikeaboss.com and take that challenge. And I want to end by giving a tribute to one of my favorite leaders, Hermione from Harry Potter, and do a poem called Hermione Rising, which is a tribute to collaboration, innovation, imagination, and being your own boss. So here we go. I imagine something new, something different. I imagine a better way, something disruptive and innovative, used and revered, demanded and paid for, something transformative. Imagination, why do we deny it and discount it? It's the source of all innovation. Einstein was theoretical, not applied. Da Vinci, an artist and a scientist. George Washington Carver, no vision, no hope. And Harriet? Well, Harriet had to imagine freedom before she took the first step. I have a dream of traveling in space, of curing cancer, of running for office, of peace, unity, equality, and equity. You get what I'm saying? It's not about the how, it's about the why, the sense of purpose. No need to teach imagination, just endorse it. And with grace, give space for it. It's not to be packed away. It should be on display in schools and offices and polling places and ballot boxes, a priority among the others. Serious vote for tinkering and sketching and making and for play. Forcing memorization of someone else's prior imagination is not the way. The recipe: give space to expand and extend a concept through empathy and understanding, through diversity and collaboration, and embrace for imagination in the case of them all. The more minds that imagine together, the more innovation blossoms. The more diverse these minds, the taller it grows. And if it's fueled by love and understanding, it thrives and soars. We are 7 billion strong, brothers and sisters. We can do anything unless we fight each other. Go human or go home, daydreamers. You are our future game changers. Your place is at the top of the class. Take out your wand and cast the spell of I want that. Be the change. And know that it'll be messy. Reality is always messy. Screw up and then rise up. Wield the magic of hope and faith. And know that the world may attack your genius now, but love you for it later. Hermione is rising, and her power is limitless. And because of God's grace, so is yours. I pray more than ever that you will use it for the greater good, and vote. God believes in you. Please believe in yourself. Thank you. And let's get this started. So I'm going to hand off to our esteemed moderator, Doana Thompson, who is the co-founder of Think Rubik's and Woke Vote. Duana, good morning.
Good morning, Tiffany. You know me, but my name is Ben Wilkes. I'm the program manager at the TomTom Foundation. Thank you for that wonderful call to action today. And I just wanted to hop in and say that Duana has had a last minute conflict come up. So I will be today's moderator, and I'm really looking forward to this panel conversation. But first, I just wanted to say thank you to you for being here and for sharing that with us today.
Thank you. And good morning, Ben. Good morning, everyone. I'll slip into the chat, and I can't wait to hear the rest of the panel.
Sounds great. Thank you, Tiffany. Well, thank you everyone for being here. First of all, I just wanted to encourage everyone who is here to participate in the chat. I'm seeing some conversations begin already. So this is as much for you as it is for everyone who's on the panel. So thank you for being a part of it. So let's meet our panelists. We have two incredible young leaders here today, and I'm really excited just to kind of peel back the layers of what their work has been like in the past few months. I imagine it has been an incredible challenge, as Mark mentioned, but also something that has hopefully provided some hope and opportunity. So we have two folks here today. First, I'll introduce Timmy Amoye. She's with Next Gen America. She's the state director of Next Gen Virginia, where she is dedicated specifically to turning out the youth vote in our election in 2020. So Timmy, welcome and thank you for being here.
Hi, everybody. It's so amazing to be here. I'm excited to be part of this amazing panel with great women and leaders in the community.
Awesome. Thank you. And our second panelist today is Ray Martinez. Ray works in Texas for Texas Rising. They train the next generation of leaders and youth organizers ages 18 to 30. Ray, thanks for being here.
Thank you all, and happy to share space here for this panel today.
Awesome. Well, I think it might be most helpful to start things off with just a little bit about each of your stories and sort of how you found yourself doing the work that you're doing. So maybe, Timmy, I'll start with you since you're a Virginia local here. How did you get into this work? How did you get involved? And kind of what got you engaged in the political process?
My story is kind of roundabout. So I'm a first generation Nigerian American. I spent a huge chunk of my formative years in Nigeria. I was born in Brooklyn though, but I lived in Nigeria for most of my young adult years. And so I came back to the States to go to college. I actually came back to the States to become a doctor. And I was flunking most of my science classes, like my first year of undergrad. And I took an elective, which was a sociology class. And I sat in that class, and my professor was, I guess, what you would call like a reformed activist from the 70s and 80s. And he talked about putting stuff in envelopes and like sending out mails for like Clinton in 1992, and how it was the most amazing time of his life. And it was like, so for extra credit, you have to find a local campaign and volunteer there. And I was like, okay, cool, this is extra credit. All my other classes were C's and D's. This would be the class where I get an extra one. And so I volunteered for a local, I think it was like a board of supervisors race, like back in Allegheny County, Maryland. And it was so amazing. I had a couple of my friends, we sat there making phone calls, knocking on doors. And yes, it was for extra credit, but it was really great. And so that summer, when I came back home down to Silver Spring, Maryland, I decided to find another place where I could volunteer. And I started volunteering for Planned Parenthood, knocking doors, canvassing for like local issues and stuff. And so when I graduated undergrad, I kind of forgot that part of my life a little bit to graduate. And I changed my major to political science. my dad was like, oh, so what are you going to do with a political science degree? And I was like, I don't know. And he was, well, yeah, you're going to go to law school. And I was like, okay, cool. That's what I'm going to do. And so I went to law school. And then my second year in law school, Ferguson happened. And I watched Mike Brown's body be on the floor for 6 hours with nobody just caring. And I just kind of lost all faith in the law. And so I decided to give my entire life view like a retool. Like, what do I want to do? Do I want to become a prosecutor, or just become a corporate lawyer and just be part of the system? And this was 2015. Bernie just started his run for president. And a couple of my friends were volunteering in the campaign because he energizes the youth vote. And I decided to volunteer. And my organizer, after Bernie lost in DC, Maryland area, she was like, do you want to continue this as a career? And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, do you want to be an organizer? And I was like, oh, I can do this. This is a job. And so she was like, yeah. And so she connected me with former organizers in Virginia, and I moved to Petersburg, Virginia for 6 months. Best time of my life. I was knocking doors. I had amazing little old ladies who was coming to our office for the entire day, making phone calls, and they were just happy to be there. They actually just wanted to make change. And so it was just going to be something I did for 6 months while I studied for the bar, and then get back to my life. And this is 5 years down the road and I'm still here. So that roundabout story was, I started doing this work mainly because of I've seen systems that don't work. I'm from Nigeria. I'm sure people have heard about my country in the news lately. Young people at the forefront of changing bad governance. And so there are days when I want to be like, I don't want to be talking to 80-year-old volunteers all my life. This is not what I want to do. But then I realized that actual grassroots organizing and activism actually changes things. And that's why I do what I do. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a roundabout way.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your story. I have so many things that I want to ask you, but I'm going to pause on those and ask Ray the same question. How did you start this work? What got you involved in the political process?
Yeah, and I'll just point out one thing that Timmy said. A lot of us have that point where we're like, we can do this as a job. This is a thing. I feel like that's really resonates really well. So kind of my entrance into becoming political whatsoever is that I grew up a kid in a single parent household, and my dad was in and out of the carceral system as I was growing up, and during that time, I really kind of learned what that meant for a person going through the carceral system, right? I saw the injustices that my dad went through, and the way that my dad wasn't was set up to continue to enter into that system, and not only the way that affected my dad, who was the most affected person in that piece, but also how it affected the family that he had around him. It just kind of tore my family apart. I remember going to visit him at 4 a.m. in the morning. So waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning to travel 2 hours away to see my dad in the state prison that he was in, and waiting in line with a bunch of other families also waiting to see their loved ones. And looking back on that, when I got older, I realized, the emotional strain that put on my family, the economic strain that put on my family. And I really kind of wanted to give back in some sort of way and invest in community, because I feel like I wanted to just give back to people who came from the same, circumstances that I did or had similar stories. So I decided to get involved and work with young people and young people of color in Texas. who deserve to be invested in and deserve to be involved in the political process. And that's kind of how I got here. And I had that same moment that Timmy had. I'm like, you can do this. This is a job. And somebody was like, yes, please come along with me. That's kind of how I ended up here at Texas Rising.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I feel like that's sort of that what you both shared about creating your own destiny, sort of finding that opportunity somewhat serendipitously, but like just owning it and taking it and running. I think, you know, that's something that is incredibly admirable that both of you have done. And also sort of like speaks to this moment that we're in, right? Like the line between crisis and opportunity, like what do you do with a bad situation and how do you leverage it to make change? And I think that's how a lot of people are thinking about the moment that we find ourselves in now. So that kind of gets me to asking a little bit about the nitty gritty. I think why some folks might be super excited to hear from you all is like, okay, so we have this incredibly pivotal election coming up in the context of what has been like a terrible year for so many people. That provides a window to some opportunity and hope and vision for the future. But in the context of all this, it seems from an outsider's perspective like impossible to do the work that you all have been doing in the past. You know, it's not like you're going to the college campus and knocking on dorm doors or going to the or maybe you are, I don't know. I guess that's the question I'd like to ask is like, how are you accessing youth voters right now? I know we only have a week left, but if anybody's trying to, you know, as Tiffany mentioned, make a difference, what are the best practices there? So yeah, two part to the question, but one, what have you been doing? And could you just add a little color and perspective to that experience for folks? And then two, like, what would you suggest for other people who want to get involved? And I guess maybe Timmy, you can kick things off, and then we'll kick to Ray after that.
So I left the Warren campaign kind of ended right as the pandemic began, and so that's when I joined Next Gen. And as someone who's worked in Virginia for like the past 5 years, Next Gen had been like the premier youth vote. Like that is the space Next Gen America occupies in the political landscape in Virginia. And so seeing them like everyone moved, I joined the organization as everything was moving online. But what I noticed was most of our organizers are fresh out of college or have been we're just in like 2 years ago out of college. That took a mouthful. And so what I realized with them is that they knew how to meet their peers where they are. And so they started having things like Tiffany, you will love this. They started having things like a Harry Potter trivia night where they would do some trivia and then talk about the election in a very fun way. We had panelists kind of like this come in and talk to young voters. Just last week, we had the Daily Show's Dulce Sloan and Jennifer Cara Foy come in and have this like skin clearing, motivational talk about what it means to be a young voter in this day and age. And so they started meeting people where they are. So we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on TikTok, Instagram, and we are finding new ways to meet the voters where they are. Young voters in Virginia are typically, and I'm sure this is probably true for Texas, they're like the most transient demographic they are. I'm sure like even looking at Charlottesville for all, like half is like actual residents and the other half is students. And then in the summer, it's like a ghost town because students go home. And so people tend to like, they're also one of the most overlooked demographics, especially young voters of color. And so what we did was tailor our organizers to different regions. They had two schools and some in a particular region, and they tailored their program to each of the region. Our HBCU organizer, Kaisha, was just profiled in the Dogwood newspaper, where she talked about just tailoring our organizing to the students. So right as students were getting back to school, she created the How to Be a 4-Year Activist while in while in an HBCU, basically giving them the tools on how to relationally organize their classmates and their friends, how to use reach to bring people into the organization, basically use every tool at your expense. For Juneteenth, we had a movie screening and a discussion afterwards with 18 to 20 year olds, just having that discussion about what voting means to them. And I think one of the things that's mostly overlooked is that a lot of them are going to be first-time voters. I voted for the first time, I think in 2012. That was the first time I ever voted, and I was already a junior in college. And so, when you educate young voters, when you register them, they will vote. I'm going to pose it to Ray. I don't know if that's different in Texas, but for Virginia, once you have that education and registration, they will be there.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, we talk about that a lot. It's like building lifetime voters. And it's just like, once you start talking to people, like, and that's the thing, right? Like where a lot of other like age groups have been invested in, have been talked to like historically, but like young people, and talking specifically about young people of color in Texas, you know, our group has been largely ignored in previous cycles. I think things in Texas have been changing for a while now, like for the past 2 cycles at the very least. Young people are realizing that young people of color need to be invested in Texas. Right now, we're seeing young people voting 3 times more than they did in 2016 in Texas, which is like really exciting. And that's definitely due to a lot of the work that a lot of organizations and campaigns have been doing on the ground, because they are investing in young people of color now in Texas. And I think similar to Temi, like we're doing a lot of stuff digitally. We're like, you know, trying to bridge that gap as much as we can. At Texas Rising, we do have have a strict policy where everybody stays at home unless you really want to be in your community, which we understand and respect for young people who feel like they need to be on the ground in their campus. Otherwise, that their folks won't be talked to. So, so largely though, our whole program is being run digitally. So we're doing text banks to GOTV young voters. We're doing phone banks through a predictive dialer, which is really helpful. We also have this really cool program that a colleague of mine, Josh, works on. It's our influencer program, where we work with other Texans of color who have Texas-based networks and followers, and we work with those folks to have them talk. You know, we partner with them to talk about the election and talk about voting, talk about the candidates, which is really cool, because we're like we're not trying to go for like the huge fish that would get us a lot more folks across the nation, but we're trying to aim for like Texas local based influencers who can really talk to a network that we're maybe not reaching all the time. So that's another cool thing that I really think is nice. And then the other part, right, like we have chapters on college campuses who get together and they determine the content of their meetings. So they're, you know, they're using Tiffany's like imagination and like going for it and finding new ways to bring other young people of color into the process. And you know, that's kind of what we're doing in this time.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, both of you. It sounds like you're finding the ways to do it, and that's incredible. Something that really is resonating with me about what both of you said is this idea of creating like a lifetime voter, that once you do it, once you're kind of plugged in, then that often doesn't change. And I'm wondering, it seems like there's the barrier there is like somehow communicating the value of the vote to people. It's like, whether they haven't been like educated or engaged in the process before, there's like, that's the challenge, is like telling people that it matters. And like, I guess my question is, how are you communicating that it matters? Because there's also this narrative that like, or at least that I've heard, you know, is that like, voting doesn't matter. You know, it's about like the radical action. It's about protest. It's about organize. It's about more than the vote, you know, and that voting somehow falls to the wayside as like just being like a part of a cog in a machine. How do you address sort of both of those, like the one that like voting isn't enough, and then the other that you know, just getting information about how it does have value. I hope that question makes sense, and either one of you who feels inspired to respond.
We just talked about this in our messaging meeting like a couple of days ago. Like there's this myth that, oh, young people don't vote, or they always think voting doesn't matter. Like my mom calls it like your generation, you press the phone, you don't care. And I'm like, okay. The first thing is, I don't know if you've noticed, young people are running for office at a greater rate for the past few years. I mean, millennial generation gave us AOC. So there is, I think older folks need to like disavow themselves of that myth that young people don't vote, or they believe that voting doesn't matter. What I've noticed is that they will protest in the streets and still go to the ballot. You actually have to just invest. There needs to be an intentional investment into young voters. And just to echo what Ray said last question, which is just like, that investment is all that matters. If you put in the time and the work, they will show. My sister is 22-year-old, and I don't know what we were talking about. And then she started talking about how capitalism affects. And I was like, oh my God, I thought you just put on makeup. This is weird that you know this. And so I say that to say that they are not like just staring at their phones and doing TikTok dances and all of that. I don't know if you've seen this video of a girl doing her makeup and talking about the Uyghur genocide happening in China. And I was just like, you're doing your makeup and talking about like global initiatives. They pay attention. They know that they don't just have to protest. They're running for office. They are voting at a higher rate than they did in 2016. What needs to change in the mindset of older folks is that there needs to be an intentional investment into the activation of the young voter base. That's what needs to change. And they also need to like not just audibly talk about like young voters. They need to create an actual space for them. You can't just be like, oh, we want young people, and then when they talk, shut them down. You have to give them that. You have to like not just talk about it, actually create the space for them. Because what typically happens is that they're like, oh, we want young voters, and then, oh, you shouldn't talk. Older people are talking, or this is grown folks' business. Don't talk about that. It's their future. It's not just their future. It's their present. It still bugs my mind that my sister was just like, oh yeah, Social Security is nothing. I'm gonna figure out how to get a 401k. And I was like, you were 22. When I was 22, what I was thinking about was just not that. And so there needs to be an investment in young voters and creating a space for them. Right? I don't refrain.
No, yeah, I 100% agree. Just like +1 to all of that. And then I think too, like, you know, going to look at exactly how like young people were set up to like there are people in Texas who are actively trying to discourage young people from voting. Like the laws are set up in a way that makes it super hard to register to vote. And then once you are registered to vote, it makes it very difficult to actually vote. So, you know, there are folks in power who are actively trying to discourage that because they know that once young people of color vote, they're not going to be in office anymore. Like, you know, they are scared. They want to encourage that disenfranchisement, that feeling of like, you know, like, I don't matter. And it's their fault. Like young people are looking to get engaged, want to be a part of, you know, are part of community, want to continue to be a part of community, and are just not being given the opportunities to. So, you know, here in Texas, like our voter registration laws are super antiquated. Like you cannot register to vote online. You have to like register to vote in person with a volunteer deputy registrar who gets certified by a county. And you just happen upon them in the wild, or you print out a form and you mail it in, which, can I just say, as a young person, I hate mailing things off. It gives me anxiety. I'm like, it just, I'm not good with mail. And then two, I don't have a printer nobody has a printer at home anymore. So like, there's just so many steps that you have to go through in order to actually register to vote. Texas doesn't want to make that available to everybody. So like, it just is discouraging. And then, our voter suppression laws, you can't vote with a college ID, but you can vote with a handgun license, here in Texas. So it's pretty clear that folks don't want young people to get involved, and that's the narrative that we have to combat. It's like, we have to bring people in and show them that they do have power, and they can challenge these people who have set things up to be not in their favor.
Yes. Wow. It's so awesome to hear from y'all about this stuff. So next, I want to talk about this sort of like idea of role modeling that both of y'all are kind of touching on, and I think you're living at the same time, like having elected officials, young elected officials of color, like this is against the grain to some extent, and it's like we're starting to see it happen, or at least like role models on a national scale, like I know AOC was mentioned. So in a lot of the, like Ray, you mentioned the voter registration laws are really out of date and just ridiculous, and that don't empower the people to vote in the same way, or at least the full spectrum of people. My question is, like, are either of y'all either working directly on this or do you know of organizations that are working on this that are like specifically targeted at putting people in office? Because this is sort of like the next step, right? It's like your voice can be heard via the vote, but how are the bigger thing is going to change people, sitting at city council, sitting in Congress, sure, like. Does your work tie into that at all? Is that something that you're talking about for the future? Or do you know of any folks who are doing it who you might want to share with people who are on the call?
Next Gen is in a weird position that, especially Next Gen Virginia, and it's a flip it floppy kind of thing, because this year we're effectively running as an IE, so we cannot directly interact with candidates. But on odd years, just because of the way Virginia is set up, we tend to interact with candidates. I would say that in the course of my career and other young volunteers I've worked with, I've seen a couple of them run for office, and other of my colleagues who are in the same age group run for office after like volunteering and knocking doors and talking to voters, and they see that, oh, I can actually make change. They go ahead and run for office. One of my volunteers from the Warren campaign actually is running for county council, city council, I guess that's what it's called here, city council in Harrisonburg. And so this just goes back to what I think Ray and I have been saying. It's just like that education and that investment. You talk to them at the doors, you talk to them on the phone, you text them. They come in and they register the young voters, or they go out and they knock doors and they phone bank, and they're like, oh, people have problems. I can help with that. I can enact laws, and they go ahead and do it. I think it all breaks down to the same thing: investment, education. This cycle, Next Gen is not directly involved with candidates, but there are a lot of, like, we have Move On, Emily's List, a ton of other organizations in the East Coast, on the East Coast, that are doing a ton of like candidate work. And even there is a fellowship that I actually always reference, the Blue Leadership Collaborative, and to teach people how to run and participate in every aspect of the campaign world. So as a finance director, as a campaign manager, as a field organizer, as a field director, eventually as a candidate. And in Charlottesville, we have the Sorensen Institute, like that's like the premier investing in young people to run for office. Like a graduate of that is Delegate Lashery Seard, who was the youngest person elected to Virginia State House in 2015. So there are active organizations working to that working to educate and help young people run for office.
So it's a part of our long-term plan to kind of encourage our young people to run for office. And so like we're at the step in Texas Residents Plan where we are really trying to lay as good of a foundation as we can with the young people that we're working with, and we're connecting them. We have a summer institute every year where we bring in people who are experts in their fields, and we have folks like talk to the young people that we work with and share their stories, share their experiences, and give trainings on similar things, right? Like how to run a campaign or like how to, you know, fundraise, all that good stuff. This past year, we had Jessica Cisneros, who ran for the Texas 28th against Henry Cuellar and almost won. Barely lost that seat, but she's amazing, and she's young and like had all this experience and is here to like do the work with the other young people in Texas. So a lot of our job right now is connecting folks, laying the foundation, and we're working on a plan to, you know, have the young people that we're working for, you know, run for office soon, and being able to support them by endorsing them and doing work in their campaign. So it's like on our trajectory list, and I think we have a lot of really great young people in front of our program right now that we're like, you guys should run soon because they're awesome, and yeah, so it is a part of our plan.
Cool, that's exciting. We're rooting for you over here. And I think that speaks to sort of like this network building, sort of community building thing that you're both talking about, like those pathways to educate people. And I saw Tiffany mention in the chat, she's gonna go talk to middle schools, like this early cultivation of just the spirit of participation, and that you have a say, and that, you know, you can make a difference and help people. I think I don't even know if I can say our generation, but the young generation, like there is a feeling of like unparalleled empathy that like we are capable of. Like there, it feels like that, not that like old folks can't feel that, but like Timmy, what you were talking about, like the distance between putting on your makeup and engaging with a challenging social issue on your phone doesn't exist for us. It's like, it's all here and now and swirling, and like it's ingrained in us in a way that I don't think other generations have necessarily interacted with it, because it's like in the newspaper and you read it and you drink your coffee and then you like plug out. Like we are faced with it all the time, for better or for worse. I forgot where I was gonna go with this. Timmy, you mentioned your professor, I think, being like a reformed activist. And so I'm trying to like get at this like young generation, old generation, like what is the difference? How do you like, do you think would you in 40 years picture yourself in a similar position where you're like educating young people and they're like, look at Timmy, that reformed activist, you know? Like if yes, how? And if no, like what's different? Like how are you going to live your life in a different way where you don't sort of end up reformed?
I think that question kind of played out in my life this past few weeks, because like I said, my country is going through this revolution where young people are standing up, and like we're very conservative. The respect is everywhere. Like I've had a conversation, I said, thank you. And my mom goes, you have to say, thank you, ma'am. And I'm like, does that take away from the thank you? Why does your generation do this? So the reason I bring that up is that we're not so different at all, after all. The difference is, and this is so controversial to say, I believe my parents' generation, for a little while, they got the life that they kind of were content with, and they decided to live with it. And then the fact that this young generation is saying, oh, it's going to be better. It can be better, not just for me, but for people other than me, and for people less privileged than me, it can be better, not just for me, but for my neighbors. And there's nothing wrong with it. I learned so much from their generation, the wisdom and of working, of going through the civil rights movement and everything, and like coming up. I have so much respect, but I think there was that thing, like you said, we have much more, like so much more empathy. Not that they're not empathetic, but like there's so much more than me going on. You're thinking of, we were talking to a volunteer a couple of days ago, and we were just like, you're not just voting for yourself anymore. You're voting for poor people. You're voting for people of color. You're voting for queer people whose rights are going to be taken away. If you are a straight white man, you're not voting for yourself anymore. You're voting for everyone around you. And I think that it's not that there will be a disconnect as I go older. I really hope, and like I just saw Tiffany in the chat, like the way my parents raised me is being to look out for other people. And so as our generation gets older, I think I don't think that feeling or that behavior is going to die out. I think it's going to be there for a long time, because the more we get knocked back down, we find new ways to question the authority and to like question what is the norm. So I personally don't think that's going to go away. I think it's going to, because we have better tools at our hands. Like I've seen people have political discussions in memes, and the core of it is not taken away. So with that amount of technology and that amount of tools, I don't think it's going to go away. Ray.
100% agree. And I also was thinking about something that Timmy said earlier about how like, you know, like sometimes older folks are kind of like, like the young people need to vote and then they just like walk away and don't do anything. I think that like as we grow older, I think that our role is to like provide resources and access points for other young people who are coming up too. So that we're not just like saying something that's incredibly tone deaf and condescending to other folks, but like providing access points which weren't provided for us before. And I think that, yeah, I also just lost train of thought that I had, but yeah, I think that's what it is. And the other piece is like, I think a lot of us really value peer-to-peer outreach, right? We know that the best messages travel through messengers from that community, right? So like, maybe not being the person who's doing the outreach to that specific, to those young people, but like, just providing them an access point to like grow and have all the resources they need to do their work. I think that that's the next step as we get older.
Yeah, that makes sense, Ray. Like instead of this sort of top down, like do this and I've done my job because I told you to do this. It's like, yeah, and it's your friends and your peers and your colleagues sort of supporting each other in this like collective kind of sense. That makes a lot of sense. We're coming up on time. So if anyone from the audience has any questions for Ray or Timmy, I'm happy to sort of tee those up. And I want to thank everyone for being here. And maybe we can offer Timmy and Ray, if you have a closing thought for people, like what brings you the most hope in your work? And I imagine there's like a lot of challenges. It's a lot of like difficult things, uncertainties, but like what either through a little story or like an overarching sort of perspective, like what is making you say like, oh, we got this, like everything's gonna be better in the future. Yeah. Any thoughts?
I'm very, very inspired by my little sister. I look at her and I know that the future is going to be good, because if everyone is just like her, I kind of tease her and give her a lot of grief. But that hostile spirit, not just for themselves, but for their fellow person, is just their entire generation. I make fun of them. I was watching something that's like, I don't understand every third word this person has said, but okay. The fact that they're trying to make the world a better place through climate change issues, like actively, young people are at the forefront of the climate issue, through racial injustice, gender pay equality, even the basics of things, they are right there at the forefront. It just gives me hope that eventually, when I get old, if I'm not already, that there are people that are going to pick up the mantle and continue. And that kind of gives me hope. Every day we text bank and we phone bank. A couple weeks ago, one of our days of actions, a 14-year-old like hopped into the chat and she was like, yeah, I'm ready to send text. I just woke up this morning and I was just ready. And I've talked to a couple of my friends and they're just going to come. And I was just like, I was not going to do anything voluntary when I was 14. That's really not something I would do. So just seeing them be just actively doing the work and not stopping and not showing signs of stopping, it gives me hope. And I think as we get older, and what the older generation should do is like Ray said, continue to give them that support, continue to educate them, continue to invest in them, let them know that the fight, eventually they're going to have to stop fighting. So they need to live a better world for the person coming behind them. And I think this generation already knows that. So I think that gives me hope, like that things are going to get better. It has to get better. They're working this hard. It will get better. So yeah.
I feel like my inspiration is similar. And like, just the young people that are part of our program are so, like, they just offer like a wellspring of hope that's always there, because they're so, they like, just watching folks like realize that they do have power, they can change things. You know, they can run a meeting with their legislator, or they can, you know, like pass a bill through their county commissioner's court or whatever it is. Seeing that light turn on, and then those people like go for it. Like, I can think of, you know, some folks in our program, Rick and Denise and Isabella, and just so many folks who have like just taken it and run with it. And like, once they exit our program, they'll be doing their own thing, you know, in their region, and they, you know, it's there, it's ingrained, and they'll be working towards it, you know. And then we're bringing up folks, those folks are bringing up other younger folks that are just coming into the program too. So it's like this layered effect where like people are, the people that we brought in are bringing other people in, and those people will start to bring other people in. So it's like, you know, having grandkids that like I don't even know that well, and you know, Rick has a relationship with them, and they're coming up, and they're having that light turn on too. So that's the cool thing that keeps me going throughout all this.
Cool. I love that idea of family, not necessarily meaning blood, but having like these grandkids that are doing it. That's so fun. Well, cool. I just want to say thank you to you both. I'm so excited to see what's next for you all. I hope we can do this again in a year. Maybe in person would be amazing. And I just want to thank everybody for being here too. As you probably know, this is a part of a 7-week series called the Cities Rising Summit. We've got a ton of amazing programs this week. Nick Kristof from the New York Times is talking about his book, Tightrope, Americans Reaching for Hope this afternoon. Chokwe Lumumba from Jackson, Mississippi is talking about basic income tomorrow afternoon. So we're just excited and maintain our hope as well. And I want to thank Apex Clean Energy for making this happen. I want to thank all of our foundation members for making this happen. We encourage you, this is your last chance to contribute to our initiative. So tomtomfoundation.org/give. We welcome your contributions and your participation in our community. So thank you again, Timmy. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Tiffany, for providing us with the introduction, and look forward to talking to y'all soon.